Joining me now is Democratic Senator from Connecticut, Chris Murphy. Senator Murphy, thank you so much for being here with me. There's a lot I want to talk to you about. I just want to start with, I kind of just gave my overview of what I see as this dictator, aspiring dictator. When did we just start calling him a dictator? Actions that include everything from this effort to militarize our nation's streets, including the city that you and I spend a lot of time in, to go after private sector companies and try to control them, even to control the Smithsonian and institutions and what our history looks like and rewrite that. But how do you see this moment that we're living in and all of those Trump actions together?
Well, I think you've identified the real danger here, which is that the president of the United States is essentially operationalizing the White House and the vast power of the executive branch, an executive branch that, frankly, is more powerful than it was a generation ago, in order to compel loyalty from the businesses that he regulates and the citizens that he governs. And the Founding Fathers were very worried about this, right? They had watched the British king, for instance, use the power of the Treasury, use the power of taxes and tariffs and levies in order to keep an entire people subjugated. And so they created a division of labor in the federal government. And specifically, they gave the powers of taxation, tariff, and spending to the Congress and said, listen, it's up to the Congress, the branch of the government most rooted in the people, most connected to the people, to decide how money gets spent. The president is part of the executive branch because all he's supposed to do is execute the decisions that Congress has made. And so what is most worrying is that this Republican Congress has just outsourced the power of tariff, taxation, and spending to the president. Mm-hmm. And as you said, he is right now, as we speak, using it to crush dissent, for instance, pulling funding from colleges where there are anti-Trump protests, and compelling loyalty from the private sector to make sure that they line up and do his bidding. So, this is a creeping totalitarian state right now. It is not too late to stop our democracy from imploding, but we can't assume that if we just continue to play politics as normal, that we are going to end up with a free and fair election next November. This is happening really fast, and it's literally the playbook that our founding fathers worried about.
We're in such a unique moment. You've called this out so often, which I very much appreciate, and it can't use the same tactics. They're just not going to work. And you've worked in a bipartisan way many times in the past. I've known you a long time. I mean, to address gun violence prevention, to try to negotiate a bipartisan border deal. You're not somebody who has shied away from trying to find a bipartisan solution. But you are now going all in on boycotting negotiations regarding the government funding bill, which I think is very interesting, a very interesting tactic to take. That is a September 30th deadline for people who are just tuning into this. Most Democrats in your caucus, or you tell me, are not exactly in the same place. So why did you decide to choose this fight as one to take on?
Well, there was a headline today suggesting that I was boycotting discussions around the upcoming budget. That's not true. I'm simply saying that, Democrats have to come to the table with values, and we shouldn't give our votes away to funding a totalitarian state, right? Right now, the government is lawless. The president is not paying attention to the words that are written on the budgets we pass. And so if we're going to pass a budget and if we're going to provide Democratic votes, well, then, that budget has to actually be implemented. There has to be provisions that require that the president continue to live up to the law. And, yeah, we wouldn't also be doing our job if we didn't put on the table some things that are about to happen to people in this country that are going to destroy their lives. Our healthcare system is about to go into meltdown. Premiums are going to go up for millions of Americans because of what happened in the previous partisan Republican budget bill. We have a chance to stop that. And this funding bill that we're going to debate in September, it's an opportunity to try to trim the lawlessness, but also to try to help people that are going to be screwed by the Republican attempt to throw people off of their health care. So I'm not boycotting anything. I'm just saying that we should fight as a party. And we should say to Republicans, no, we are not going to give you a blank check with our votes in order to fund a state that increasingly mirrors the kind of authoritarian regimes that we have fought against all over this world.
Yeah, and look, I'm glad. Thank you for the clarification on the boycotting, and that's a little. Headlines are always a little off. Sometimes they're not always, but sometimes they are. So thank you for that. But I think it's interesting. The reason I wanted to talk to you about it is because the way that it was approached by Democratic leadership in the spring was pretty disappointing. I mean, that was my view. There wasn't a huge fight back. It didn't seem that way. So what does the fight back look like this time? Because this is a stake. Republicans need Democrats to be a part of this negotiation to move it forward and keep the government open. So how does that work, and what does that look like to fight back?
Well, listen, I obviously, did not provide my vote for that, budget in the spring. But I understand that was a moment where the country was still, kind of shell-shocked by the way in which Trump was starting to seize control of the government. That was before Republicans passed their own budget bill that threw 17 million people off of their health care. The stakes now in the fall are, I think, just a lot sharper and a lot brighter than they were in the spring. If we don't start to write some provisions into these budget bills to stop Trump from acting unconstitutionally, if we don't restore some of the health care that's being lost, we are going to have a democratic and moral disintegration of this country. So I think the American public are sort of up for a fight over values. And, I think my colleagues understand that, at some point we have to draw a line. At some point, the president has gone too far. For me, it was months ago, but maybe what has happened this summer, in particular what's happening in D.C. right now with the militarization of the nation's capital, will be enough for people to say, all right, this is a moment where we should fight to protect democracy.
Let's certainly hope. It's certainly made some damaging and bad progress on the part of the Trump administration the last couple of months. Senator Chris Murphy, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us tonight.